People look at last year and they're like, oh, they won 4 games and, they were one of the worst offenses in the country. They had one of the worst quarterbacks in the country. When they had Cam Rising, they were still a pretty good team. Devon Dampier is going to be a big part of their success. That said, I think Devon is being incredibly overhyped based on his production at New Mexico State, which as a passer, I'm not incredibly impressed with. Hello and welcome to the Aptive Podcast Studio. This is the Loyal Cougars Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Edmonds. Joined again today by Tosh Mackintosh. Tosh, how was your week in Hawaii?
It was fantastic. Yeah, I was checking out BYU Hawaii, so it was BYU related. But no, anyway, I was not checking it out. I was living for a week by there with my family on vacation, and beautiful part of the world.
Recruiting some high school football players.
Oh yeah, Kahuku is they are a legit powerhouse and a good recruiting pipeline. So
absolutely.
I did my part there. I went to the ward, Kahuku second.
Nice.
Was telling people, hey, you should go to BYU.
There you go.
No, I did. The last part's a lie, but I did go to the Kahuku ward. Maybe that helped a little.
Okay, so as you know, if you've watched this show, we are the podcast that talks about what you, the fans, are talking about. And as has been the story all off season, is the Jake Retzlaff saga, which seems to have officially kind of come to an end. I know it came to an end as far as his relationship with BYU, but both ESPN and On3 both reporting that Jake Retzlaff has picked his destination, which is Tulane. And the question then becomes, why Tulane? And I think it's because he didn't have anywhere else to really go. I know Notre Dame was an option early on. Miami, I think, wanted him at some point. TCU was thrown out there in the conversation. But I think at the end of the day, and this isn't any insider information on my end, but I think at the end of the day, those schools had quarterbacks that went through their spring camp. They had experience with the team, some of them, and they didn't necessarily want the baggage to come with Jake Retzlaff. Not to say that Jake was going to be bad for the locker room, but think about it. Even in Tulane, I think Jake is going to, whenever he steps out onto the field, that is going to be the premier story of that game broadcast, is what happened to Jake in the offseason. And I can't imagine a P4 school that has other options at quarterback, even if they're already on the roster, would want that baggage.
Correct. Absolutely. And I think as important to that, and maybe even more important, is that the quarterback is the field general for the offense. If he doesn't know your playbook at all a month before your first game, that's a bad thing. And that's where Jake is with all of his options. He would have been going into fall camp knowing zero about their offense. And that's a hard place for him to be in. That's a hard place for the team. And if I'm Jake, my number one thing in where I went is I have to be on the field. He has high ambitions. He has one more year of eligibility. It does not work for him to reach any of his goals if he's not on the field. And so that had to be priority number one.
Yeah, and that's why he transferred, right? He could have stayed and sat out 7 games and played the last, quarter of the season, but he wanted to play the whole year. And so that's where it becomes interesting now, because he joins a team. Now, it's a team that doesn't return a lot of production at the quarterback position, but they did have a quarterback battle between Caden Simonza and Donovan Leary. One's a sophomore, one's a junior. And these guys, think about the dynamic of the team too. Like, these guys already have some of the locker room behind them, and they're competing for the starting job. Now they're going to have to compete with a brand new guy who has no experience in the system, has no experience, didn't play even in the spring camp, didn't play with them in spring camp. And he's going to come in. I assume one of Jake's requirements of joining a team was that he would at least have some assurances that he would start.
Yes.
And so is there really going to be another quarterback battle, or are these two that were competing for the starting job now competing for the backup job, and one of them's not going to get hardly any reps at all season?
Yeah, no, it throws a big wrinkle into Tulane's locker room, into how things are going to go for them. One thing that is funny is just yesterday I was talking to my brother-in-law, college player, played in the NFL for 5 years, knows what he's talking about here. He was telling me, he's like, Jake has got to go to a lesser school.
Yeah.
That he's like, if I'm in any locker room and some new guy shows up that I don't know if I can trust him. He didn't have like incredible stats, and he doesn't know the playbook. So we've got to dummy down our fall camp to get this guy up to speed. I'm going to be looking at him side-eyed unless I think he is a big upgrade. And the only way that he's going to have this big upgrade factor is if he goes down a level. And they're like, no, this guy played for a bigger program. He had success at a bigger program. And so I think I've seen some people surprised today at Tulane. After my conversation with my brother-in-law, I think it makes perfect sense. And he gets that there where, yes, he's the new guy and doesn't have him. But I think if you're at a school like Tulane, he walks in with credibility that he had success at a P4 program and won a lot of games.
And it's a school that yes, they're G4 or G5. So they're not the cream of the crop premier schools, but they were still 9-5 last year. They lost to Florida in the Gasparilla Bowl. So they had a pretty good season last year. And Jake is the type of player, to your point, like that has, P4 experience, I wouldn't say he was the reason they were successful last year, but he at least contributed to their success last year. And so, he has that experience in a winning culture. And so this is going to be a Tulane team that thinks that they can, what we used to call bust the BCS, but, make a New Year's Six game and, potentially create some, for lack of a better term or no pun intended, waves in college football. So again, I agree. I think this is a good spot for Jake. It's a good spot for Tulane. Will you be paying attention at all to Tulane football games?
Absolutely. I actually am somewhat intrigued and like the fact that this gives me one more game to keep an eye on every weekend.
Yeah.
I don't know how many I'll watch start to finish, but it's going to be more than zero. I will watch some Tulane football and keep an eye because I have a vested interest. I rooted for this guy for years. I know his flaws. I know his strengths. It's going to be fun to watch. So yeah, I'm not afraid to admit that I will watch some Tulane football this year.
I will too. This episode is brought to you by Aptiv. Aptiv believes that every home should be enjoyed. They tailor their pest control treatment plans to target pests when and where they're most active. Plus, if you see pest activity between treatments, Aptiv will return to take care of the problem at no additional cost. It's their way of making sure every customer is satisfied and every pest is controlled. If pests stay away, Aptiv is why. Visit AptivPestControl.com/Loyal Cougars or call 844-966-4787. Mention this promotion to get your initial treatment for just $29. That's AptivPestControl.com/Loyal Cougars or call 844-966-4787. Terms and conditions apply. Get home field advantage with Aptiv. Looking to get your brand in front of BYU's most engaged fans? The Loyal Cougars Podcast and Cougar Board are your perfect match. Cougar Board is the largest online community of BYU fans with thousands of posts every day. The Loyal Cougars Podcast is the official podcast of Cougar Board, and we have sponsorship opportunities available for both the podcast and the site. Contact us at sponsorships@loyalcougars.com. We'll help your message hit home with the Cougar faithful. Again, that's sponsorships@loyalcougars.com. All right, so that brings us to our next topic of conversation, which is, I don't know if you saw this, but on X, a beat reporter for PHNX Sports. He's a beat reporter for Arizona State, so leans heavily Arizona State, and you'll see kind of what I mean when you look at these rankings. His name is Anthony Tautry, and he has a podcast where he put out the by position group top 4 in the Big 12. And I want to go through his rankings and then kind of do our own as well. And what stood out to me was actually we'll kind of go down the list. So at quarterback, he ranks by team Arizona State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Baylor. And I want to hear your thoughts on that, and I want to hear who your top 4 quarterback rooms in the Big 12 are.
Yeah, it's actually one of the only position groups I think he got it pretty right.
Agree.
Sam Leavitt, though, I do think might be getting overhyped. He had a great year, and he has the NFL measurables. But anyone who watched Arizona State last year knows it was 90% their run game, and they lost that guy.
Yeah.
And so, to me, it's going to be interesting if Sam deserves to be in the top 4. I don't know if he deserves to be number 1, but I understand while he's there. And yeah, it's not like BYU has an argument to be in the top 4, and I don't see a big, huge red flag of a team that should have been on there that's not.
Agree. I agree that Arizona State probably has the best quarterback, although I think Sawyer Robinson could make a case that he would be the best quarterback, and we'll see it play out this season. But I totally agree. And it's funny that last year at this time, we thought Arizona State, at least the pundits, right, the experts, the analysts, thought that Arizona State was going to be the worst team in the Big 12. They didn't fully understand the impact that Cam Scadaboo would have on this offense.
Correct.
And they also bring in, and we'll talk about the receiver group in a little bit, but they also had Jordan Tyson, who was arguably one of the best wide receivers in the conference last year. And so, yes, Sam Leavitt, I think, is a serviceable quarterback. I think he will be in the conversation early on to be to win some awards at the quarterback position. I think he's going to disappoint in terms of where his expectations are versus production. I don't think he is going to be the Heisman caliber quarterback that Arizona State fans are expecting him to be. And again, I don't know if he necessarily will finish as the top quarterback in the conference, but I do have him preseason number 1. Behind him, I have Sawyer Robinson at Baylor, Rocco Becht at ISU, and kind of a dark horse here is Josh Hoover from TCU. I think TCU is going to be a pretty pass-heavy offense, and I think Josh Hoover actually brings back a lot of production for TCU. And honestly, it's funny that we're talking about, people talk about this like stacked quarterback class in the Big 12. I think it falls off quite a bit from your top 3. I think your number 4, 5, 6 quarterback is really a toss-up, and it really falls off after Rocco Becht.
Yeah.
And that includes Devon Dampier, and we'll talk about him in a little bit as well. But
for sure.
I don't
He's
understand
the most
hype around him.
overhyped quarterback in there right now.
I just don't get it. And so you see this hype around
it's
Sam
because
Leavitt.
they need hope. They need him to be legit. That's what it comes down to.
He reminds me, and the other thing too is it hasn't been too long since they had Tyler Huntley, and Huntley is very much from the same mold as a Devon Dampier, where he's a phenomenal running quarterback. If you put an offense around him that can run the ball well, like a read offense, you give him good running backs, give him a good offensive line, which Dampier has. At least serviceable running backs. Obviously, Mekhi Bernard's but not back, and we're going to preview Utah in a little bit. But Devon can run the ball, and so if he's healthy, you're almost looking at a Taysom Hill that can't throw, or again Tyler Huntley. Tyler Huntley wasn't a phenomenal throwing quarterback, but he could run the heck out of the ball. So I do think Devon is going to be impactful, but I do think he's overhyped.
Absolutely.
Compared to his production at New Mexico. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Sam Leavitt, again, I think is overhyped, but I do think coming into the season, he can deserve, he deserves the number 1 spot. So then you move to running backs. And here's where I have probably one of the biggest issues with these rankings. So this beat reporter, Anthony Tautry, he ranks Baylor number 1, West Virginia number 2, Texas Tech number 3, and his team, Arizona State, number 4. No Cam Scadaboo.
Yeah.
Obviously, if Cam Scadaboo's there, they're number 1, right? But no Cam Scadaboo. And so that's where I have the biggest issue. Now, just to give you some context, Baylor does bring back Bryson Washington. I think he's going to be a phenomenal running back. He's actually the top returning running back in the conference in terms of production. So he will be good. Number 2, though, I have LJ Martin. How do you not even in the conversation? I listen to their podcast, not even the conversation.
I think that I credit to Anthony for he's putting out content that's intriguing. I think that he forgot to look at the BYU roster.
I agree. He doesn't mention BYU in the receiver conversation either, and we'll get to that in a second. I think he forgot that BYU was in the conference.
Yeah, it's wild because LJ Martin is legit for sure. And yes, if you just look at his total stats, he has been injured, but if you look at him per game, per play, you've got to think this guy can do some real damage. He's got a great offensive line too. And so I think that LJ Martin is the most underrated player in the Big 12 for this year. I think that if he can be healthy, is going to be the breakout star of BYU's season and of the Big 12, that he is an NFL quality running back, and he's going into his 3rd year now. And he last year he had surgery in the offseason. Mm-hmm. He's going into this year at a whole different stratosphere from health. I am stoked on LJ, and I think that 2 is fair. I think he might be pushing for number 1 though during the season.
Yeah, I try to avoid looking biased, but I do think he has the potential. So you look at returning. I mentioned Bryson Washington being the top returning running back in the conference in terms of production. Right behind him is LJ Martin. So let me just go through running backs. By the way, this conference loses a ton of production at running back. Taj Brooks, Cam Scadaboo, Brooks Taj, Cam Scadaboo, RJ Harvey, DJ Giddens from Kansas State, Devin Neal, Kansas. And then you got Corey Kiner from Cincinnati, Mekhi Bernard, who we're familiar with as BYU fans. Phenomenal running back at Utah. And it's wild to think that Ollie Gordon would be number 8 on this list because
he was beast.
He was a Doak Walker Award winner before, right? But
but
Ollie Gordon's on that list as well. And so you lose 8 guys who were, and all of these guys picked up by NFL teams, most of them drafted, by the way. So you have NFL caliber guys that are gone. And so really the running back position in the Big 12 becomes kind of wide open. And again, you just look at production from last year. Bryson Washington, LJ Martin, number 2. Jaheim White is actually on my list for number 3. I think this guy had him at number 2. He had the running back room number 2 on his rankings. But Jaheim White is a big part of that. And I think it's, Jaheim had a pretty solid year last year. And so I'm fine with that ranking. And then Quentin Joyner from Texas Tech is who I put at number 4. By the way, the only reason I have him at number 4 is because Brooks Taj is gone, so he's going to take a lot of those carries from Brooks Taj. He transferred in, I think, from USC. He's a USC transfer. He played at the same high school as Brooks Taj. And so is it Taj Brooks or Brooks Taj? I feel like I'm reading it wrong. Let me just double check. It is Taj Brooks. I've been reading it wrong. It's Taj Brooks. He comes from the same high school as Taj. Taj is actually the biggest reason I think that he came to Texas Tech. But I think he's going to take those carries and have a pretty decent production year as Taj did last year. So that's my top 4. Baylor, BYU, West Virginia, and Texas Tech.
I agree with those.
Okay. Let's move on to receiver. And this is where it gets a little bit questionable as well. So Anthony, in his top 4 receiver rankings, Arizona State, which I'm fine with. I think they have the best returning receiver in the country in Jordan Tyson. But then you go down the list, and it's Texas Tech, Kansas State, and Baylor. By the way, we didn't talk about Avery Johnson. I left Avery Johnson off my top 4 quarterback list because I think he is also incredibly overrated.
Well, there's another name, too, that we should have mentioned in that, too, Noah Fafita. Yeah. Like, he's 1 year away. Going into last year, everyone thought he could be the number 1, quarterback in the conference. And then he had a dud year. I think most of that was on his offensive line, but who would be shocked if he was great? Like, if we had a chance to get Noah Fafita in the transfer portal before,
I'd love it.
Yeah. And so, that guy's legit. And that even gets me into the receiver position of that. Noah seemed like the type of quarterback that just threw it to one guy. And I believe his name was McMillan.
Yep.
That got drafted, but I think that Arizona and Fafita are going to have another receiver that gets the bulk of the things that's going to put up big numbers. But the obvious big thing that he overlooked is how in the crap is Chase Roberts not in the top 4 receivers? It's just offensive at this point. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that I think he just forgot about BYU, but if not, it seems intentional. The obvious picks in these rankings were left off.
Yeah, and I looked at his rankings, and I felt like he probably just went through the preseason All Big 12 team and picked, position groups from that and maybe mixed in some ASU guys. But if that's the case, then Chase Roberts would be in the conversation, right? Because he is the BYU's only offensive player that is on the preseason all-conference team. And so that's probably the biggest travesty that Chase Roberts is not on this list. So my list is Jordan Tyson, Arizona State, Chase Roberts, BYU, Eric McAllister, TCU, and Caleb Douglas, Texas Tech. And to be fair to Anthony, he's ranking entire rooms, right? Position groups. And okay. I'm only listing top players in those positions. But I think that the point still stands. If you were to look at BYU's entire wide receiver group, you bring in Parker Kingston, you bring in Tiger Bachmeier, and then obviously Chase Roberts on top of that.
JoJo Phillips has showed flashes.
Yeah, so you lose Keelan Marion, you lose Lassiter. You still lose talent, but you bring in a lot of guys.
For sure.
So I think that's the biggest travesty is that Chase Roberts is not in this ranking. And then you go, and Anthony actually ranks offensive line. He also ranks some defensive groups, run defense, pass rush. and coverage defense.
And BYU was on none of those.
None of those lists, which I think is insane. But look, we have day jobs. I'm not going to look at every single position group on defense and say like, oh, this linebacker I think is better than this linebacker or this safety. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to take him at his word. But what was wild to me is that BYU's not on any of those defensive groups. But then going back to the tight end position, he has Utah number 1. And I listened to the podcast and it felt very non-researched. He said Utah churns out tight ends every year, top tight ends every year. And he talked about Keithy, he talked about Dalton Kincaid. And so he was basically just using history as a reason why Utah is going to turn out, the top tight end group in the country. I don't think he realized that Utah doesn't really have like a bona fide tight end even on their roster.
Their only guy transferred to us.
Their second guy transferred to Duke. They're bringing in a receiver like we did with Keanu Hill, BYU did with Keanu Hill, and transitioning him into a tight end.
Yeah, they lost their top 4 tight ends from Keithy, Lohner, Ryan, and then the Duke guy.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a bold prediction.
Yeah. And just for reference, I actually, because I just wanted to see what other people were saying about the Big 12 tight ends. So Yahoo Sports also ranks position groups. I think they actually just ranked tight ends in the article that I read. Utah's last.
Yeah.
Utah's last. They're 16th in their rankings. And so to me, that's way more realistic. Now, BYU, I think, was 13th. And so they're not giving enough love, I don't think, to Carson Ryan. As you know, my hot take of the year is that Carson Ryan will lead BYU in receptions. I'm kind of backing off that a little bit.
Just own it, Jake.
I still think Chase is going to be the best receiver on the team. Obviously, one of the best receivers in the conference. But in terms of raw receptions, I think Carson Ryan's going to get a lot of targets. My top 4, and sorry, not my top 4. I just took Yahoo's because there's really not a lot of like tight ends don't get enough love. I think nationally, like in terms of rankings, in terms of volume and spotlight and attention. So I just took Yahoo's. They have Texas Tech with Terrence Carter Jr., Joe Royer and Patrick Gerd, both at Cincinnati, and then Iowa State's room has Ben Brahmer and Gabe Burkle. Baylor has Michael Trigg. And that's their top 4 on Yahoo. You can go to Yahoo Sports and read their entire 16. The question, though, is do you think Carson Ryan can have a breakout year where he can be a top 4 tight end in the conference?
Yes. So here's the things that are concerning on him. And that's some of these aren't even that bad, but he's been kind of pegged as he's a blocking tight end, mm-hmm. and that his biggest strength is his ability to block like a lineman, which that's a great thing, but that usually doesn't lead to a lot of receptions. But word out of spring ball was, man, don't overlook our man Ryan, and he's making catches all over the field, and the quarterbacks are loving throwing to him. There's also the element of, I think BYU has recruited incredibly to the tight end position over the last couple of years. Some of that has to be that they're telling these guys, look, we're going to start throwing to the tight end. Yeah. Like, how else are you getting these 4-star guys over and over and over to recruit to commit to BYU? I think A-Rod has got to feel some pressure on living up to those recruiting promises. And so that's where I think Ryan is flying under the radar, but you might be the first to be calling it. That when you factor in, I think he's a better receiver than people think, and A-Rod has got to be feeling the pressure of actually start using that position, that we are poised to have a breakout year from Ryan and the tight end position.
Yeah, and I think A-Rod has shown that he can utilize tight ends. Like, I think when he had bona fide tight ends on his roster, he's used them pretty well. Isaac Rex, obviously one of them.
Had a ton of touchdowns.
Dallin Holker obviously had a successful career at BYU before going to Colorado State and having even more success. So it's not that A-Rod doesn't utilize tight ends. I think last year we just didn't really see a ton of, and I keep saying bona fide, but like Keanu Hill is not a tight end. He's a receiver that was playing the tight end position, and they kind of rotated among other guys.
I should know his name, but we had the 4-star surfer guy, but he was a freshman.
Yeah.
And
he's on a mission now.
He actually caught a lot of balls for a true freshman.
Yes. So. And so I do think that a Carson Ryan can come in and I actually think being a blocking tight end helps him stay on the field to where they can, put in wrinkles for him to catch the ball, where he can fill that Dallin Holker type of role. Big body, good blocker, but can also catch the ball. I think Isaac Rex is a little bit smaller in terms of size and more of a traditional catching tight end. And so I don't think Carson Ryan fills necessarily that role, that responsibility. But as a blocking tight end, I think that can benefit him to keep him on the field more so that he can be in those kind of positions to catch the ball when they need him to. They don't have to constantly switch. With was it Swanson or Swanson? That's
Swanson.
Swanson, yeah. So whenever the joke was whenever he came in, you knew BYU was going to go to him, right?
Correct.
That was like they
he was in the game,
showed their cards, yeah.
Correct.
And you don't have to do that with Carson, right? You can bring him in, you can block with him a few plays, get LJ Martin some yards, and then run downfield and catch a ball. So I think it'll benefit him. And again, I'm really high on Carson Ryan. I hope that he proves me right, because then I can hold that above everyone's head in the middle of the season. So that said, we're going to move on to our early preseason previews, and our next game up is Utah. And to be honest, this is probably the hardest game of the year up until this point.
For sure.
And I don't think that's really controversial to say, right? Like West Virginia may be more difficult, but I think Utah is going to be the toughest game at that point in the season that they will have played.
Absolutely. They've got some guys, especially in the trenches, and they get up for this game unlike any other. I mean, Kyle Whittingham did say that USC is their main rival, but I don't see them on their schedule this year or ever in the future.
It's Colorado again, right?
And so this is the game that they get up for. They almost beat us last year when they were down and we were up. It went down to the wire. So this will be a dogfight, and it's going to be the hardest game on the schedule up to that point. I don't think that's controversial.
Yeah, and I actually don't think it's that biased or coincidental or controversial to say that they are going to be competing for a Big 12 title this year. People look at last year and they're like, oh, they won 4 games and they were one of the worst offenses in the country. They had one of the worst quarterbacks in the country. When they had Cam Rising, they were still a pretty good team. They lost Cam Rising, that team went to crap. And they don't have to now granted, Devon Dampier is going to be a big part of their success too, right? Because if they lose Devon, then they're in trouble, I think. I don't know who they have backing him up.
Yeah.
I don't think it's somebody that nobody's hyping as much as Devon. So if Devon stays healthy, he's got the offensive line. Now, does he have the people to throw to? Does he have a running back to hand the ball off to that can take some pressure off of him? We will have to see. But I think Devon is the type of quarterback that can really determine the success of that offense. Now, that said, as we mentioned, I think Devon is being incredibly overhyped based on his production at New Mexico State, which as a passer, I'm not incredibly impressed with.
It's people need hope, and
like Leia, like Star Wars.
Exactly. And so the fans need him to be the guy that comes in and changes what last year was, but I don't think he's that guy. And here's a couple points on why. Number one is I don't think that he's going to be able to make it through the season uninjured. That he's a run-first quarterback, and now he's playing with a different level on the field every week. And when people right now hear about McKay Hillstead, what do they say? He's too small, especially for a run-first quarterback. Okay, McKay Hillstead is listed at 5'10", 195. Devon Dampier, he's listed at 5'10", 198. He's the exact same size as McKay Hillstead.
Yeah.
And he is a run-first quarterback. And he's going to be on a team that does not have the offensive weapons to move the ball down the field. That you look at, they lost their best receiver in Singer. They lost their workhorse running back in Bernard. They are going to need him to be their offense. And I just don't think that he has the build. And I don't think any quarterback very often can be like a run-first quarterback and go in uninjured for the season. And that is going to be a big thing that could just derail or really change their season if he goes down.
Yeah. I think my comparison to him was, this is for Utah fans, was Tyler Huntley. I do think Tyler was probably a more accurate passer, to be honest. But he was also a run-first quarterback and ran the ball really well. But in terms of, maybe BYU comparison, and this is strictly from a passing perspective, because at the end of the day, he is a quarterback, right? From a passing perspective, I compared him to Jake Retzlaff. So just to compare stats, he completed 57.9% of his passes, had a few more attempts than Jake. Let's see, Jake had 2,900 total yards. Dampier had 2,700 last year. For New Mexico, remember that. This is for a G5 school. Dampier threw 12 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. I think this is probably the biggest criticism of Dampier, is that he just doesn't take care of the football. BYU fans talk about Jake making, freshman decisions as a junior. He had 20 touchdowns and also 12 interceptions. So imagine Jake, but fewer touchdowns, right? Less passing production. So all that put together, Devon Dampier's quarterback rating was a 121.6, Jake Retzlaff 136.6 in the Big 12 versus in a G5 school in New Mexico. So now, yes, you can point to rushing numbers, and I'll do that real quick. So Dampier had 1,100, almost 1,200 rushing yards last year, 19 touchdowns. So yes, Dampier is gonna cause defenses fits in the running game, and I think Jason Beck is going to take advantage of that. He's really good at that, right? But I think from a passing perspective, and we saw this with UCF last year. UCF had a phenomenal running quarterback that couldn't pass the ball to save his life.
Yeah.
The backup quarterback was the guy that actually brought them back into the game when they were down 4 touchdowns or whatever. He made them look, at least, I think they won the fourth quarter of that game because they brought a passing quarterback in the game. UCF's quarterback could not throw the ball. I think you're going to see the same with Devon Dampier, where if Utah gets down by 2 scores and you need to start throwing the ball, and defenses know you need to start throwing the ball, you can't run the ball. It's second half or whatever. There's no time. You're gonna dig yourself a bigger hole by putting a quarterback that cannot throw the ball on the field, because teams know you're not going to run the ball with this guy. So will that happen? I don't know. I think Utah's defense will probably keep them in enough games where they're not in that big of a hole. But if that ever happens where a team goes up 2-3 touchdowns on them, Devon is not the guy that will be able to bring you back in a game, in my opinion.
So piggybacking on that, I'm going to say one thing that gives me a lot of confidence, BYU versus Utah, and then one thing that gives me concern. I'll start with the confidence, is that Jay Hill has proven that he feasts when an offense is one-dimensional. And you look at against a very good Kansas State team last year with Avery Johnson, against a very good offensive team in Colorado that was the inverse. They were pass only and no rush. But if you are a one-dimensional offense, Jay Hill is going to be a wizard, and he is going to give you fits. And I think that gives me a lot of confidence. Utah is going to be really one-dimensional on the run game this year and weak on the pass. The thing that scares me a little bit is that Kyle Whittingham has always been a get his team up for a big game kind of coach. And they are going to be playing as Utah as a program for their futures. And that's sounds like hyperbole, but I mean it. That BYU has been beating them in the head-to-head recruiting the last 2 years. And it's just getting wider and wider. And they know it and they feel it. BYU has won the last several matchups. Utah hasn't won since 2019. Kyle Whittingham wants to retire.
Yeah.
But I feel like he couldn't retire after last year because of that season and losing.
He said that. He admitted to that in the Big 12 media days.
Yeah. And so they will be hyped and like a wild animal trapped. And they will be up for this game. And so that's what I think gives them the best hope. I still like BYU's chances, but it's going to be a war.
Yeah. So then we've already kind of talked about their offensive line. Spencer Fano, Caleb Lomu coming back. They're going to be first round draft picks. So I think that's what gives Utah fans probably the most hope, even more than Dampier, is that Dampier will have protection in the passing game and also in the running game. Now, Mekhi Bernard is gone, as we mentioned. But Utah brings in Wayshawn Parker from Washington State. He was the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. Phenomenal running back, 137 carries, 735 yards, and 4 touchdowns. As a freshman, 149 of those yards, by the way, came against Utah State. That set a Washington State freshman record. So you've got a young running back who, he still maybe has to prove some things at the Big 12 level and not at the current Pac-12 level, which might as well be G5 at this point. But he has proven to, perform well against competition that he's played. And that Utah State game where he had 149 yards, 2 touchdowns, is a big part of that. So again, Mekhi Bernard's gone. Like, I don't think you can fully replace his production, but you do bring in talent, and then you do bring back offensive linemen that can make the offense work as long as they stay healthy. Now, the depth isn't there. I think depth could be a potential problem if guys get hurt.
Correct.
But if they can stay healthy, I think Utah's going to be a tough offense. Defensively, we've seen how Utah can do defensively. I think last year their defense was the spotlight of the season, right? Their defense is what kept them in games despite their offense not getting past the 50-yard line, it felt like in some cases.
Yeah. In
most games. So, they still bring back Lander Barton. They have Smith Snowden, who BYU, obviously, despite their best efforts, couldn't land, according to people, right? According to people we're not going to name. And then Logan Fano also coming back. So they bring back production. I think their defense is going to be pretty stout again. It's just a matter of, can their offense execute better than they did last year? I think they can, but can they execute on a level where they want them to be, which is, top of the Big 12 type of talent? And so that's probably the biggest question mark. But we'll know, I think, by week 6, week 5, whether or not this Utah team is going to be good. And I think it's helpful that it's later on in the season and not first 3 games of the year.
For sure. No matter what, though, it's going to be an intense game. I love it. I'm obsessed with sports, and this game is the pinnacle of my sports fandom every year. Like, nothing means more and is more fun. And I don't shy away from that. It's the rivalry and the intensity and how much everyone cares just makes it great. And I get hyped even just talking about the preview, like real excited for that game.
Yep. I do have my season tickets. I will be going to that game. I'm pretty sure tickets are selling for like $200, like in the nosebleeds already for that game. And so it's going to be a hyped game as it is every year, and definitely looking forward to it. All right, Tosh. Thank you again for hopping on. Appreciate it as always.
It's always a pleasure.
This is the Loyal Cougars Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Edmonds, alongside Tosh Mackintosh. If you like what you heard, please head over to YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified every time we upload a video. We do it weekly. Also, head over to our podcast channels, Apple, Spotify, iHeart Podcast, I think, has one as well. Head over to those and subscribe to those as well as we keep this thing growing. Until then, we'll see you next week.